love bugs. Thanks for coming back to my channel. Wednesdays con Wilma. Thank you for spending some of your Wednesday con Wilma book besties. I am back. You are back. And if you're new, welcome. Hit that subscribe button because I am about a few subscribers away from my 100 subscriber goal for Q1 of the year. Help your girl out. And also, happy Women's History Month. So let's get into this week's video. All right. All right. Don't forget, hit that follow, hit that subscribe, help a girl out. For those who know me in real life, you know me in real life, so help me out. Happy Women's History Month. I was thinking, what could I do for this series? And I was thinking and pondering, and I looked no further than my shelf because my shelf has books, okay? More than enough books. I don't got to go to nobody else's store or library for quite some time. I got my own personal library right here. And so I did. And I looked upon what I have had and what I haven't had an opportunity to read from these women authors. All of them are actual memoirs, which is pretty cool, but they're also all different women that you can pull from. So let's get into what I'll be reading for the month of March for Women's History Month. Hola, hola, love bugs. Thanks for coming back to my channel. Wednesdays con Wilma. Thank you for spending some of your Wednesday con Wilma book besties. I am back. You are back. And if you're new, welcome. Hit that subscribe button because I am about a few subscribers away from my 100 subscriber goal for Q1 of the year. Help your girl out. And also, happy Women's History Month. So let's get into this week's video. All right. All right. Don't forget, hit that follow, hit that subscribe, help a girl out. For those who know me in real life, you know me in real life, so help me out. Happy Women's History Month. I was thinking, what could I do for this series? And I was thinking and pondering, and I looked no further than my shelf because my shelf has books, okay? More than enough books. I don't got to go to nobody else's store or library for quite some time. I got my own personal library right here. And so I did. And I looked upon what I have had and what I haven't had an opportunity to read from these women authors. All of them are actual memoirs, which is pretty cool, but they're also all different women that you can pull from. So let's get into what I'll be reading for the month of March for Women's History Month. Okay, estamos listos. My first book for this series that I will be getting into for this month is My Broken Language, a memoir by Quiara Alegría Hudes. Really cool. She's from North Philly, so this will be taking upon her transcendence from girlhood into who she is today, a powerhouse. Fun fact, she was also the Puerto Rican Day Parade captain for my job about 2 years ago, I believe it's been already. Yikes. Super cool. So I cannot wait to get into this book this month and discuss all of the things that she has gone. She is from Puerto Rican descent, I believe, and this book is a encapsulation of a woman who's trying to find her own voice in the sea of language around her, written and spoken English and Spanish, bodies and books, Western art and sacred altars. Her family became her private pantheon, a gathering circle of powerful Orisha-like women with tragic real-world wounds, and she vowed to tell their stories. But first, she'd had to get off the stairs and join the dance. She'd have to find her language. Oh, I like that. So I can't wait to get into My Broken Language by Quiara Alegría Hudes. I love and adore this woman. I remember she popped up on my screen. I think I was like watching Bravo or something, and there was a chef who did a private like dinner for her. And once she came on the scene, I was like, I love her, and I so want to be around women who are like her, and that is Bevy Smith and her memoir, Bevelations, Lessons from a Mother, Auntie, and Bestie. I love her personality. It's larger than life, but she's like on the fashion scene. She's a taste maker, mover, shaker, socialite, and just overall, like if you ever got to see her in anything, she is this larger than life persona. Very much I said what I said. Um, type of woman and just glamorous. And so I cannot wait to get into This book and a memoir. It says Bevy Smith was living with what seemed like a glamorous dream as a fashion advertising executive, blazing a lucrative career for herself and in the whitewash magazine world. She jet setted to Europe for fashion shows, dined and danced at every hotspot, and enjoyed a mighty roster of lovers. Ew. Okay, coming with a quarter chronicle history. So it came to a quite shock to Bevy when one day after arriving in her luxury hotel in Milan, she collapsed on the fret bed sheets and sobbed. Years of rolling with the in crowd had taken a toll. Her satisfaction with working life had hit rock bottom. But Bevy could not be defeated. And within minutes, okay, days, she grabbed a notepad and started realizing a truer path. One built on self reflection and ultimately clarity. She figured out how to redirect her life toward meaningful creative freedom. Can't wait to get into Bevy Smith's Bevelations. Love the title already. So this is going to be a good one. I can see it already be full of truths, some hard truths, and some good laughter. And I love when a book can look like it can give you that good mix. Next, for the month of Women's History Month readathon here is Viola Davis, Finding Me. Viola Davis is a true tour de force. Like, she is super talented. I absolutely cringe when they say she is the black version of whatever white actor. No, she is the Viola Davis. Like, put some respect on her name. I cannot wait to read her memoir, Finding Me. This was gifted to me by my sister eons ago, and I just never found the time to read it. She was just very much like, read it, it's so good. You'll get so much out of it. So I am a true believer that no matter how long you have a book on your shelf, when it's the right time for you to crack it open, it will find you. So this month I will be getting into Viola Davis, Finding Me. We have Assata, an autobiography by Assata Shakur. I was speaking to a good friend of mine a few days ago, and she was talking about a podcast. I believe it's Women Who Kill, and they did a episode on her. So first of all, I need to go and make sure I listen to that. But I've had this book on my shelf for quite some time as well, and I need to crack it open. I have heard nothing but great things about it. This revolutionary. I need to read this book, and so what better time than for Women's History Month than to read Assata autobiography? And last but not least, but this month's first read is You'll Sound Like a White Girl, A Case for Rejecting Assimilation by Julissa Arce. This book was presented to me when I was running oh, I missed this program, but I was running a Entre Mujeres program by Unidos US that was funding it through a after school program, and we were basically tasked with talking with young ladies that are in middle school to high school transition and getting them into all different career paths and mentorships. And they gifted us Julisa's book, and I have a signed copy. Thank you, Julissa. Thank you, Unidos. That was a really, really great program. They have, I believe, branches across the U.S. I know that there's a program in New Jersey, particularly in Perth Amboy. Shout out to Perth Amboy. You have my heart always. Hey, Karina. They have in Washington, D.C., and of course in Texas, Chicago, and I believe in California. I was so grateful that they had a conference, and we were in Austin, Texas a few years ago, and they just did such intentional work with us as the facilitators to give to the young girls that it's such a great program. If you have a young daughter, cousin, friend who can get into one of these programs at their after school or at a nonprofit that they're housed in, please, please, please look into it. It's such a great, great program. This book from the introduction will be grabbing you de aquí, mira, de los pelitos, de the baby hairs, okay, desde ahí. Because her introduction is so just like, fuacata, ahí mismo, like, hey guys, let me tell you about my story. This little American dream, yeah, put that away. This need to be so American, so white, yeah, that's a fraud. And let me tell you why you should not be out here chasing this unnecessary dream, because they don't like you. They don't want you. No matter how hard you'll work for it, they will never accept you. And it was just like, my people. I've met my people because that's how I feel. Like this need to be into the white sphere as a Latino is like bonkers. But she does such an immense job from the introduction to throughout the book to really provide a lot of like case study, law, um, real life facts as to why one this occurrence happens and debunks the need for like why you should do it, and she does it in such an amazing way. So it's first of all, it's a pretty short and condensed read. You let me see how many pages, about like 200-ish, but it is pretty like dense with some of the information alongside her memoir, right? Um, a little bit of about Julissa. She was born in Mexico for the first 11 years of her life and then immigrated to the US with her family. And fortunately, her visa had expired, and not wanting to go back and occur with a penalty, because I believe she speaks about the immigration legislation at the time was if you would go back, you wouldn't be able to come back for 10 years. And having to risk that, her family was just like, that's not a risk we're willing to take. She discussed a lot in depth about the immigration and how to do it the quote unquote right way, which pathways there isn't one. Like there is no real right way, and how we as Latinos can perpetuate that stereotype when we get ourselves situated, how we'll close the door on the folks behind us. I will say it was nice to hear in the book with like, oh, now that Donald Trump's out of the office, I was like, we had a breather at one point, and now it's like, if only, if only that you knew, Julissa. If you could have a crystal ball, this man's back there wreaking havoc, bendito. But all in all, Julissa's "You Sound Like a White Girl" discuss in the introduction alone how in junior high her little crush was like, "You sound like a white girl," and she spent so much time practicing how she enunciates her words so no one can tell that English was her second language, that she took that as a compliment, but she realizes in hindsight he didn't say that as a compliment. Her memoir discusses a lot about her own internalized need to assimilate and wanting to play the part so much with language. A lot of the beginning chapters of the book discusses a lot of this need to adopt English so that if she spoke well enough, that she wouldn't be like second guessed of like, oh, do you belong here? And all of that, what she internalized. Discussing the legislation that was taken away from a lot of Latinos, specifically in California, that they took the bilingual education and how that did an adverse reaction with the graduation rates. So much so that when they finally brought it back in 2006, I believe, how that graduation rate went, that dropout rate went down to like 7.7, when it was like in the double digits. So how important it is when we are able to meet folks where they're at, specifically those of second languages, brown bodies, that they need these things, and how inherently racist this system is. Um, just overall, so much information that she presents in this book. Many times when I read certain books, like a memoir or just kind of like a more dense book that's going to give me a lot of information, or I'll like annotate, excuse me, in the sense of like, I want to make sure I put in this quote. I want to make sure that I don't miss that because it's super, super deep. I take good notes. And so I'm going to read some of the things that I wanted to address about the book that I believe is super pertinent for those who will want to read it, and what I took away from it. This is also how I stay sharp with my writing. I love school as a kid. Fun fact about me, I love learning, really. I could care less for like deadlines, but I always loved learning, and that's where also a thirst for reading came about. Just always wanting to take all this knowledge in. I truly enjoyed it. Like as a kid, I would be like immersed in books all the time, just constantly wanting to just get as much information. And I think it's also because I was learning English at the same time, growing up. English was like this thing that you learned outside, and Spanish is what we learned growing up in our home. My mom was very much like, you're going to learn English in school, pero aquí se habla español, and that's where that is. And so as an adult, I'm super grateful that that was my immersiveness into the language because I'm able to speak, even though sometimes I get tongue tied in both languages. But I am forever grateful that I am able to communicate with my mom, communicate with the elders in my family, communicate with community members that I serve in their language, and able to pick up on different accents and try my best to give them an ease. Learning things like mande, or I remember I worked with two brothers from El Salvador, and we were just getting into the nuance of like the word ahorita, like when they were be asked to do something like, sí, sí, lo hago ahorita. And I was like, no, but I need it done now. And they'd be like, yeah, that's what I said. And I'm like, no, for us, ahorita is like way later. And they were like, no, ahorita's like, I'll do it right now. And so like just having those interactions within the dialects of Spanish was really, really cool to recognize, or just learning other words that like for us would be okay and others are disrespectful, and vice versa, was always like a really cool tidbit. So I am super grateful that my parents taught me my language, even though it is a colonized language, because quite frankly, we should be talking Arawak, but however, comma, we'll not get fully into it. So let's get into the notes. You Sound Like a White Girl, A Case for Rejecting Assimilation by Julissa Arce is a memoir that explores the complexities of identity, race, belonging, particularly a Latina woman who navigates the tension between her heritage and the expectations of a mainstream of American culture. Julissa was a former undocumented immigrant who later became um, a citizen and a prominent advocate for immigrants' rights, brings her personal experience and reflections into the thought-provoking, candid narrative. So here are some themes that she discussed in the book. Particularly, I broke it down by identity and belonging, her immigrant experience, language, and this dualism that she speaks of being like Mexican American, not Mexican enough, American enough, and then eventually this like realization that I am both things. These both things hold true to my identity. Um, so yeah, so first and foremost, identity and belonging. Julissa explores the concept of identity in American context where racial and cultural expectations often clash. The individual self perception, the title itself, You Sound Like a White Girl, reflects the racial stereotypes and prejudice she experienced as a Latina who became, because of her accent and mannerisms, didn't seem to fit in that Latina box that others would want it to place her in. One of the main quotes that I wanted to jot down is, to be American means to be someone who doesn't speak with an accent, who speaks English without hesitation, who moves effortlessly between cultures, or so I thought. This capsulates the struggle of being a part of multiple cultures but never feeling fully accepted either, highlighting where Julissa grappled with her sense of self. Super, super important in that space. She does talk about like that dualism, specifically when she was in Mexico as a child, like even being like too indígena was like frowned upon. She discusses the quote unquote it's very stereotypical thing that like abuelitas would say, which is like, stay out of the sun or you're gonna get too dark, or marry someone light. Para mejorar la raza, discussing that Spanish caste system that has been brought out with colonialism and being conquered, where in this caste system, the hierarchy, the closer to Spanish blood, the better you were. So much that she talks about how, like, a lot of Mexican folks would say, like, yeah, yeah, I have a grandfather who has blue eyes. Typical to like the African American folks who say, yeah, yeah, I had a grandma who's Cherokee princess, and all of this to not be the full sense of who they are, was really, really interesting to see and read, that we all have that shared experience. Julissa also explores the immigrant experience. Someone who lived as an undocumented person for most of her life, she truly became an American citizen in her adulthood. She talks about like buying papeles off of a woman because she needed a social security card to advance and go off to college. Like she made it to quote unquote the highest point of anyone's ascendance, right? She was working for Wall Street and discussed those she has an anecdote in the book where she is talking to a client, a billionaire at that, and he's like asked her to get her coffee, and she like felt the shame of that of interaction of being like, oh, at first she's like, oh, maybe he asked me because I was young. But then in hindsight, I was like, no, he asked you because his inherent racism could not fathom this brown woman had the education, the experience, and the capacity to help him with his portfolio. But she discussed one of the quotes that I wanted to make sure that I touched on is when you're undocumented, you just don't feel invisible, you are invisible. This powerful statement not only speaks of Julissa's like own experience, but also reflects the broader struggle of like so many undocumented folks in the United States. Like just my own social service experience of when we have to go take demographics and when we discuss like, you know, social security number, really wincing that a lot of our folks will feel of like in that moment, do I share my status? Am I going to be safe? What's going to happen next? Um, and I'm glad that I'm able to have that experience and be able to advocate when we're talking about what we're going to collect in the care that we need to have for our undocumented folks. That many a times I'm like, is that really relevant? Do we really need that? Do you understand that you're going to alienate folks to participate in whatever survey and or program? So just even though I myself do not have this immigrant experience, being able to work with folks and recognize that fear and that unseenness, right? This invisibleness that she speaks of really brought into a full context of how I will then also work with folks in the future. What my role in my own job is moving forward to advocate in other ways as I've already done. But it was very, very uh glaring like wow, not even realizing that one, I recognize that they did live in fear of always being having their status questioned, but to say that they are invisible was just like really resounding and very like gut punching, like dang, like to feel that you are invisible in this world is so hard. And also all the other things that they're processing, right? Like they've left their country for whatever reason. They're trying to learn the language or they're just trying to navigate and just trying to feel safe. And then on top of that, you're not even looked at or seen. And I've seen that as well. Just even with my own experience with my mom, just when she didn't have language and I would be translating for her and just this like dismissiveness of her, or just dismissing it for both of us because here this adult is talking to a child about this adult, the whole situation feels off. Julissa talks a lot about race and stereotyping. Julissa discussed how race plays a significant role in shaping perceptions of her. Her story is not just about immigration, but also about how others perceived her based on her appearance, the way she speaks. The concept of sounding white becomes a recurring motif throughout the book, making the reader reflect on how language and accents are often linked to the assumptions of class and race. A little bit about what I was talking about earlier. She wrote, I'd spent my whole life trying to prove to myself and others that I was not the stereotype they saw when they looked at me. That was a lot of her work, right? Like practicing in the mirror. She had kind of like a bluest eye moment where she would say, like, she would practice in the mirror for hours to enunciate her words, so much so that, like, to see the reflection of some white woman, some blonde hair, blue eye woman looking back at her, having perfect English. Because again, if I speak well enough, I won't be questioned on whether or not I belong here. The pressure of the dual expectations, right? Julissa expresses how challenging it was to navigate the pressure from her own family to uphold cultural traditions while simultaneously wanting to fit in with her American peers. This dichotomy between the world at home and the world outside is a recurring theme in the book. In the introduction, she discusses how when she decided to leave her job at Wall Street and move forward in what she wanted to do, like more of a passion. Her mom was like, no, you don't do that. Like you pretty much won at life. You have education, you have a great job, you have papeles. And it was like, I too have experienced that with my mom. She always would say like, "Oh, you jump around from job to job," and it's like, no, I see where my value is, and therefore I'm going to pick up and go to the next job because my resume, my experience will put me in other positions. When this current job does not see my value, and I just would recognize that fear. At first, it would just be like, women, be happy for me. Like your daughter beat out all these candidates for this position, but not recognizing that in her mind, it was like, you stay at this job, you do well, you keep it going, and then eventually you retire from it. Because folks of her era did not move around, right? You had a good job and you did what you needed to do and it provided for your family. And this is where a lot of the disconnection between my mom. But first of all, it was me. It was just me. I didn't have children to feed. I didn't have to worry about that additional pressure. So I had the liberty of my movement, and also these jobs ain't jobbing like they used to. Like you don't get to retire from this pension. You don't get the increases that you did. You don't get those benefits. Like folks was able to buy homes and have social mobility. That doesn't exist anymore. And so having to convince my mom of when I would make these moves to be at ease, and the way that she would be like, "Mom, I'm gonna be okay." In the book was very interesting to have that like see myself moment. A lot of the book is also really, I mean, granted, the title "You Sound Like a White Girl" is revolved around language, and the power that particularly English language is always catapulted. The book delves into how language is not just a means of communication, but a tool of power. Julisa's experience is being looked down upon for not speaking perfect Spanish and being accused of sounding white are prime examples of language shapes social hierarchies. She wrote in the book, "The more I learned to speak English, the more I felt I was losing myself. But then the more I spoke Spanish, the more I felt like I was rejecting my new life." That internal conflict just highlights that navigation of constantly that dual experience and dual identity. I don't know when I perfected my English in school or when I lost a lot of my Spanish, but I know that for like middle school to high school, there would be a lot of pauses when I would like speak to my mom or speak to elders, and I'd be like, damn, like, why can't I just translate this word? And it was because I was moving along into this Americanized culture, and she talks about how pervasive like white supremacy is. Like it's not super in your face all the time. It's in this space of you not even knowing that the moment that you reject all that you are to move along in this way because it's quote unquote easier or it's what it's expected. She discussed a lot of that in her upbringing, and it got me to reflect a lot about mine as well, of like, when did I transition into where English was a easier way to communicate? I know that when I went to college, I made it of extreme importance to take Spanish as a second language because I knew that whenever job I needed, I was going to be helping Spanish speaking folks. And I wanted to ensure that I did it well, and more importantly, that I could read it and write it, was super important to me. So I know that in my college years, there was something that clicked for me that I was like, no, you need to perfect the language that you have, what little language that you still have left with Spanish, and make sure that you build that muscle more and more. Julissa is super transparent in her writing. It gives humorous, it gives raw, it gives so much of like just how she retells her experiences. It makes it so much easier for me as a reader to connect with her book. And then at the same time, her reflections are so like gut wrenching and being like, damn, like you went through that. I just want to give your younger self a hug. Or again, being in social services, particularly how this book came to me, with young women and mentoring, and being like, damn, like you were holding a lot of heavy themes in and on your shoulders. Um, I truly hope that you had an outlet. And she even writes that in the introduction of this book, writing this book was the means for her to heal from all of this. But yeah, that was You Sound Like a White Girl, A Case for Rejecting Assimilation by Julissa Arce. That was this week's first review. I give this 5 stars across the board for our first series, first book in the series for Women's History Month. Oh yeah, I know I'm asking a lot from you this week because I asked you to make sure you subscribed and followed, right? We're making sure we're doing that. And B, baby girl, baby girl started a new creative venture with her homie Diane Rivera. We have a podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify called the Boricua Culture Mix. Um, it drops it dropped this Tuesday. We'll continue to drop episode each Tuesday. No, not on Wednesday. I already got a lot going on Wednesday, but Tuesday is our podcast day, and we would love for you to give it a listen. And it will discuss similar a lot of themes that was in this book, and other things that are happening in like culture, politics, relationships. It is a love letter to our culture. We're both Puerto Rican women, and it is that groove and tying into of La Isla to the diaspora, just in a lot of consuming of content, I realized there's a lot of great things that are happening on the island, and then a lot of great things that are happening with Puerto Rican stateside, but there isn't really a tie into that. And so I wanted that podcast to feel that way. The first episode is out, so please, if you have this moment, give it a listen, and I would love for any and all of your feedback. That was a lot this week, but I hope you enjoyed this series. I hope you enjoy this series moving forward. I'm not sure like what order I'm going to read these books in, but I'm going to make sure that I read them for this month. And I kind of want to do it that style. A lot of this, I want to make sure that I don't leave out key pertinent points of the book. I review my recommendations, and I'm always like, oh yeah, this is good, and it was great, and this was awesome. But no, I want to make sure that I focus in on a lot of the great key elements and ensuring the good quotes from the book. So that's probably going to be my review style moving forward. Tell me what you think of it. Thank you for spending some of your Wednesday con Wilma. And as always, read what entertains you and you'll never be bored. Love y'all. Pieces. Don't forget to subscribe. Get me to 100. Ow. Bye. Besitos.